Today on a very special edition of the Football Takeover YouTube show, where will Jonathan Taylor go? Let's do it. Welcome into another edition of the Football Takeover YouTube show. I'm John Harris, owner, founder, CEO, grand poobah of the Football Takeover universe, footballtakeover.com, at JH Football Takeover on YouTube, which you already know because you're here. So yesterday I was talking about Jonathan Taylor, and it's been a big story in the NFL. And so I thought, why not do a show and talk about and discuss where Jonathan Taylor could go and what makes the most sense. So what I did was I went through teams that made sense. It's probably about 6 or 7 teams. And I looked at the current depth chart. I looked at the salary cap space. I looked at draft picks for 2024 in particular. And then I just, last and certainly not least, common sense. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, does it make sense? Now, there are a couple teams that apparently have already made offers. We will get to those and tell you which ones they are that we know of. Now, there are 6 that have inquired, allegedly. 2 of them that have made offers, and we'll see where all of that ends up. So, let's start in the NFC East with, well, a team that makes maybe the most sense. It's the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, keep a couple things in mind. Number one, Jonathan Taylor is from New Jersey. So, maybe the Jersey teams, or a team that's very close to Jersey, the Philadelphia Eagles, could be in play. So, let's look at what they've got. Now, typically the Eagles have had extra draft picks. We'll get that in a second. But they do. And so that's going to help. So the current depth chart. Remember, they traded for DeAndre Swift during the draft. They didn't give up much to do it. They also have Kenneth Gainwell, who's been there for a few years. He's more a third down slasher back. You've got Rashad Penny, who was a free agent signing. And then you've got Boston Scott. I think that's the deepest of any of the running back groups that could be considering Jonathan Taylor. But are any of them Jonathan Taylor? No. So maybe in a package going back to Indianapolis, who could use running backs if Jonathan Taylor's out, maybe you package Rashad Penny in a deal going back to Indianapolis. We'll discuss that in a second. Salary cap space, about $14 million. Not bad. The one thing about the contracts of the Eagles are very interesting, just throughout the team. Base salaries are very low. Bonuses, really high. So they've converted a lot of base salaries into bonus seemingly over the years. But it was interesting going through this entire exercise to look at the contracts and how teams structure them. That said, about $14 million in cap space this year. They don't have a bunch of exorbitant cap numbers either this year or next year. So if they got a deal done to make the trade and then gave Taylor an extension, I don't think they'd be overextending themselves. Not sure what kind of deal they would give him. But Eagles have the one thing that apparently the other teams don't seemingly have. They've got their first, they've got 2 seconds. They got New Orleans second. Then they've got a third that will probably come back to them in a comp pick, Javon Hargrave. Then they've got a conditional 5th that could be a 4th in the Jalen Reagor trade. They've got their own 5th, and they've got 2 potential comp picks for offensive linemen, Isaac Seumalo and Andre Dillard. So you could be looking at 2 seconds, 4 5ths, and 2 6ths. So Philly's got the most ammunition. They've got the ability to pay him with cap space. And he goes in that offense, and it's an offense that Nick Sirianni is going to know him a little bit. So all things really kind of point to the Eagles making a lot of sense. I don't know that there is anything that doesn't make sense about the Eagles other than the fact that their running back room is already pretty stout as it is. But if you packaged Taylor coming to the Eagles, and the Eagles sent back, say, a second, one of those 5ths, maybe the conditional 5th that could become a 4th, and Rashad Penny, maybe that would work. Now the Colts get a running back, they get additional picks, and then it becomes the contract time for the Eagles. I would imagine that Jonathan Taylor wants that long-term deal. What's the long-term deal? I don't know, maybe a fair thing is to kind of, instead of 5, instead of 2, maybe split it kind of in the middle. Go 3 years, $45 million. Guaranteed, 40 of that. Maybe that's a deal that would get Jonathan Taylor. Maybe guarantee the whole thing. And maybe that would make Jonathan Taylor happy. That would give him 15 APY. I know he wants 15 to 16. Gives you 15 APY. It's 3 years. You're not really kind of out on a hook for a guy that's going to be in his 30s, and the Eagles get an opportunity to win a championship with Jonathan Taylor next to Jalen Hurts. That was the best, to me, that was the best offer. There are a few that make some sense, but to me, the Eagles kind of have the best package. The Eagles apparently have made an offer. All right, the next team, Miami Dolphins. Now, they don't have as stout a depth chart at running back. They have Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., Devon Achane, Salvon Ahmed, Myles Gaskin, Chris Brooks. Now, I saw those guys last week, and they all have got a little something. They all have a lot of speed, but they're not Jonathan Taylor. That's clear. Now, in a trade with the Colts, I don't know that the Colts would take back any of those guys and go, yeah, I like that guy, I like that. I don't know if any of those guys would go back. I think they would want to keep Achane because he becomes the third down. I mean, dude's a 4.3, 40 guy, 10.2 and 100. You have Achane with Taylor. Wow. Here's the element, though, in Miami that I don't know if Taylor's going to love, and that's that offensive line. I don't think the offensive line in Miami is great. I don't think it's going to be a great running offensive line. So I think that's going to hurt Taylor's numbers. Dolphins have their full allotment of picks. You can structure a deal similarly, a second, a fifth, and maybe a player for Taylor. Maybe one of the running backs. I don't know if the Colts would take that. But maybe you, again, that deal of 3 years, $45 million, maybe you go for that. I just don't think Miami makes a lot of sense. Whereas the Eagles make a ton of sense with that offensive line, their run philosophy. Sirianni already knows Taylor. I think you're getting a whole different Taylor down in Miami in that scheme. I just don't think they're going to run the ball effectively behind that offensive line. And so Miami just doesn't make sense. So if the Eagles are a 9.5, to me, the Dolphins are probably a 7.5 to an 8. I mean, it could transform the Dolphins, but I just don't see the offensive line being a group that can make way for Jonathan Taylor the way that it needs to. So we'll make the Dolphins a 7.5 to an 8. All right, let's stay in the AFC East for the next team. That's the Buffalo Bills. Similarly to Miami, and I think Miami's offensive line is better. I think Buffalo's offensive line is not good at all. And I love Deion Dawkins. And I do think there are some other pieces, but some of the young guys they've expected to step into roles haven't done it. Roger Saffold was not great, so they didn't bring him back. He's still out there to be signed. I just don't love the offensive line for the Bills. Current depth chart, they got James Cook, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, Darrington Evans, Ty Johnson, Jordan Mims. Good backs. A number of good backs there. I don't know if there are any of them that are great options. And I don't know if the Colts would take any of them back in a trade. So it's not a great room, but it's not a horrible room. But you got to take some pressure off of Josh Allen. Jonathan Taylor would do that. But I just don't know that Jonathan Taylor is going to want to run behind that offensive line. I mean, Josh Allen takes pressure off Taylor, but I don't know that Taylor's going to want that. They've got a full complement of picks. They've got 3 6-rounders at this point. Now, it's not a ton, but if you have a second and maybe throw in a couple of 6 instead of your 5th, then maybe you could save a little bit there. They've got about $6 million in cap space, so they'd have to do some configuring. But with the addition of Dalton Kincaid, that's going to be more 12 personnel. You could do some more stuff out of 12 personnel. So I think it would fit for the Bills. The Bills, I think, could want it, but I don't know that it fits for Taylor. I'm going to make that about a 7.5 as an option for Jonathan Taylor. Now, my wild card, or I should say dark horse. I got a dark horse and a wild card. Are they kind of the same thing? This was one, and I actually said this to Mark the other day, and I think I said it before Kay Adams tweeted it. What about the Dallas Cowboys? Now, I don't love it because Jonathan Taylor in Dallas, wow. The depth chart kind of plays into Taylor's favor if you're thinking about it from that perspective. Pollard's only there on the franchise tag for 1 year. Then they've got Ronald Jones, who's suspended to start the season, Deuce Vaughn, Rico Dowdell. So not a lot there. And if you want to take pressure off Dak Prescott, well, how do you do it? With the run game. Well, Tony Pollard's fantastic. But Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott were fantastic together. So what about Jonathan Taylor in Dallas? Now, from a depth chart standpoint, that is a pretty darn good fit. Really good fit. Jonathan Taylor and Tony Pollard with Deuce Vaughn as the third down back, if you want to use him that way. They don't have a full allotment of picks. It's not surprising. Got a first, a second, a third, a fourth. And then they have 2 7ths. So to package a deal, maybe they could put together a second rounder and then maybe a couple of players. But as I went through the roster trying to find players that would fit for the Colts, I couldn't find a great fit. So that's one stumbling block. They have plenty of cap space. They got almost $20 million in cap space. So they've got plenty of cap space. It's just how would you construct a deal? I think that might be the best for Taylor because the offensive line still got plenty of juice. Mike McCarthy has said he wants to run the ball. Tony Pollard is there to take some heat off of him and keep him fresh. I think all the pieces for Taylor are pretty much there in Dallas. The only one, what's the compensation? What's the trade? If Dallas had an additional second or had an additional third, man, they really could put together a good deal. And then Jerry's never been scared to extend even new players. And can you imagine Jonathan Taylor on the Cowboys? Go with that 3 years, $45 million deal. Could that fit? Yeah, it actually does. Now, you might have to move a few things around at 24 and 25, but it actually does. I'm going to make the Cowboys an 8.5. The only thing, again, I don't know how they could structure a deal that could match up with the Eagles. And if it's NFC East teams that are in conflict with one another, man, the Colts' Chris Ballard is going to play one off the other, and that would lead probably to the Eagles. So I still think it's a great look for the Cowboys to have Jonathan Taylor in their sights. Just don't know what they can offer trade-wise that would make the Colts all that happy. All right, let's stick with the NFC East. The Washington Commanders. Now, Sam Howell is going to be starting quarterback, and we'll go with it. I think Sam's going to be okay. I really do. I think Sam's going to be fine. I don't think Sam's going to be Joe Burrow, but I don't think he's going to be bottom of the league. I think he's going to be a pretty solid quarterback. I think he's got weapons on the outside, Terry McLaurin, De'Ami Brown. I think the Commanders have something offensively, but they really want to be a ground and pound team, and they have been. When I saw them last year in Houston, well, they just ground us into the dust. And they got Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson to do that. Then they drafted Chris Rodriguez, who is a hammer. So they've got running backs in the stable already. It's not as if they need Taylor. But it's a new ownership group. Josh Harris, Magic Johnson's involved. A little splash would be big in Washington. This would be a big splash. The Commanders have their full allotment of picks. I just don't know that Taylor would fit there. I don't see the Redskins' offensive line the same as the Eagles. They're probably a shade under the Cowboys. Chase Roullier just retired as center, former center. So I don't know if I love the fit for Taylor. He's going to take a pounding there because teams are going to play probably heavier boxes and more guys there to stop Taylor in the run and force Sam Howell to beat them. I just don't know that's a good fit. They can't do that with Jalen Hurts. You can't always do it with Dak, but you can do it right now with Sam Howell. So the Commanders also have about $13 million in cap space, so they could do it financially. And they have a full allotment of picks, so they could do it and then give Taylor a deal that would matter. So I could see the Commanders getting involved in this for a number of reasons. It's probably about a 7.5 to me. Mainly because I don't know that Taylor is going to really be intrigued by the Commanders all that much. All right, let's get to the one that's going to just make me sick. The Kansas City Chiefs. Current depth chart running back, I think is pretty good. Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Then they drafted Deneric Prince out of Tulsa. He's a freakazoid. So they're loaded at running back already. It's a deep group, but we know that Kansas City team goes as Mahomes takes them. But I think Patrick would love to have Jonathan Taylor take some of the heat off of Patrick Mahomes, make him better than he already is. And Taylor, with all that space that's created in the passing game, would, I think, run roughshod. I think it would be a fantastic fit on numerous levels, and that's why I hope it doesn't happen. However, two major things. Number one, they have less than $1 million of cap space. And number two, they have not signed an extension that he wants, Chris Jones. That seems, to me, to take precedence over anything. Sign Chris Jones, 1, everything else 2 through whatever. That's got to take place. And I don't know, with so little cap space, how they get all of it done. Now, they don't have a 7th, but they've got pretty much their allotment of picks. But at this point, do the Chiefs need all their picks? No. So the Chiefs could put together a deal that could get them Jonathan Taylor. But I think they need Chris Jones more than they need Jonathan Taylor. And I know Andy Reid was very, I'm not going to say blasé, but he was, Chris Jones not in camp. We'll be okay. He should be here, but we're moving on, whatever. They need Chris Jones. They absolutely need Chris Jones. They could play a game or two without him whole season. Nah, they need Chris Jones, and they need Chris Jones more than they need Jonathan Taylor. So at that point, I would put this anywhere from like a 6.5 to a 9. If they could somehow find a way to bring Chris Jones back in the fold, somehow get him a deal without extra money, and then rework the money such that they can bring in Taylor, they're not going to mind giving up draft picks. They would just have to come to the right compensation. And Taylor might take a little less to go play for the Chiefs and do it for a short amount of time. Go win a ring with the Chiefs, be a valuable part of it, go for 3 years. You still got 3 years probably after that to play in the league. Bada bing, bada bang, you get another deal. Maybe it's with the Chiefs, maybe not. So I'm going to go anywhere from like a 6.5 because they haven't extended Jones and he's not happy, all the way to a 9. If you got Jones signed, then absolutely put the chips in and go get Jonathan Taylor and run roughshod over the AFC for the next 3 years. You think the Bengals and Bills would see that? Oh my gosh, forget that. The Kansas City Chiefs, very interesting. All right, here's my wild card, and I've got 2 more. One we kind of talked about a little bit because of his New Jersey ties, but here's my wild card. The Detroit freaking Lions. Current depth chart. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Now, Montgomery was a signing for them in free agency, and they lost Jamal Williams to the Saints as a result. So it's kind of a 1-2. After that, there's really not much depth. What about packaging Montgomery in a deal to go to the Colts? The Lions have a first, a second, 2 thirds, a fifth, a sixth, and a seventh. The second third coming from Minnesota in the Hockenson deal. So they've got some draft ammunition. They've got about $20 million in cap space. They've got a really good offensive line. They've got a division that is winnable with Zava gone. I think this is a great opportunity for Lions to make some noise. Now, would Taylor want to go to the Lions? I don't know. Would he want to sign a long-term deal with the Lions? I don't know. If the Lions put that money out there, if they've got the cap space, which seemingly they do, I think the Lions would be a really good fit. Now, if you can't move Montgomery and then you're left with Gibbs, Montgomery, and Taylor, somebody's going to be disappointed. Well, Gibbs is going to get slot reps. He's going to get third down reps. I love Gibbs. I mean, he could be the number one. He would be in this situation. I think he is. I think Montgomery is the complement to Gibbs. But if you put Taylor with Gibbs, holy smokes. It's just a matter of, could you move Montgomery to the Colts and give the Colts a running back option? Would they want him back? Would they want David Montgomery? Who's to say? But Detroit Lions, Jonathan Taylor, offensive line, creative offensive coordinator, money is there. They've got draft picks. Current depth chart isn't that deep. They could really use Jonathan Taylor. Detroit Lions, my wild card pick. Now, I mentioned earlier he's from New Jersey, so we talked about the Philadelphia Eagles. What about the Giants? Now, just bear with me on this one. The Jets make no sense. They just signed Dalvin Cook. I don't see it. But the Giants, it's a run-first team right now. Worst case, they're 50-50 balanced. They do have Saquon Barkley, but Barkley's only in town for a year, seemingly. I don't know if they're going to get a long-term deal done. And that maybe is a sticking point, that if they're not going to play Barkley long-term, how are they going to pay Jonathan Taylor long-term? Would the Giants pay 1 year for a rental and have Barkley and Taylor? I don't think that's going to happen. But if they were able to sign a long-term deal to Taylor, then Barkley, it's tricky. So I don't see the Giants really being a factor in this. I just think the Giants are going to be one of the more underrated teams in this league. And he's from New Jersey. You could see he wanted to go home. Giants have about $5.5 million in cap space, so they'd have to do a lot of work. It feels like the Giants have too many hurdles to overcome. There are other teams that have less hurdles to overcome. It's just a matter of structuring a deal now that's going to make Jonathan Taylor happy and make the Colts happy. And they've got until Tuesday it's an artificially set deadline by the Colts, but I think it's probably the right thing because Tuesday is the cutdown day. So, which team makes the most sense to you? Eagles, Dolphins, Bills, Cowboys, Commanders, Chiefs, Lions, and finally, maybe the Giants. I think the Eagles make the most sense, but you'd have to do something with that running back room. I mean, you'd have to move one of those running backs, probably a Rashad Penny. You just traded for Swift. Gainwell's a third down back. Boston Scott's kind of a poor man's Darren Sproles. So if you move Penny, well, Taylor's your number one guy, clearly. But you have depth with him. And that could make a lot of sense. Could make a lot of sense. This Jonathan Taylor situation is really intriguing to watch, especially as I'm with the Houston Texans, the AFC South. It's really fun to watch. I just hope something gets done. So get to work, teams. Get him out of the AFC South. Now, please. And there you go. The Jonathan Taylor Show right here on Football Takeover on YouTube. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.